my thought is, are they ever going to hit big on a receiver? It feels like they're bringing in multiple receivers every single year, and you're waiting
Uh-huh.
for one of them to explode to Trevor Lawrence, and it
Yeah.
just hasn't happened. And the latest one, you take Brian Thomas in the first round of the draft. And I like Christian Kirk. He's a good player. I liked Gabe Davis. He's been pretty bad over the last year or so. So that's what I'm wondering. Are they ever going to hit big with one of these receivers? They have guys that certainly contribute and have solid seasons, but Pam, you would know better. I mean, right? Like they're always putting assets into this position, so they're basically telling us that they're trying to get better and they're not pleased.
So here's my from the Jags fandom perspective. You're putting a lot of emphasis on the wide receiver position. The Jags are trying to input this player that's going to be the saving grace for the team. I have question marks about Trevor Lawrence. We did see him he extended his contract 5 years, 275 million. Obviously, they're saying that Trevor Lawrence is the guy. He's the long-term guy. Let's see what we can do with him. I have been riding the Trevor Lawrence train since his college days, that he was going to win the Heisman back-to-back years, didn't come to fruition, that he was going to be the best player in the rookie season, that didn't come to fruition. I know you can go into, okay, well, the coaching situation. Every year this is the year that Trevor Lawrence makes the jump. This is his 4th year, and I don't think it's necessarily the problem with the wide receiver position as much as it is about, is Trevor Lawrence really that guy? He was the 6th worst in touchdown rate on drives that crossed the midfield last season. The other 5 were the Jets, the Giants, the Steelers, the Panthers, and the Patriots. They were in the same category. So now not only did you extend his contract, making the same as Justin Herbert, by the way, but Trevor Lawrence was the 4th worst quarterback for completion rate inside the 10. And that wasn't just 2023. He was actually worse in the last he's been progressively getting worse over the course of his young NFL career. I have question marks about, does he have the skill sets? And if it is really the wide receiver position, then okay. Calvin Ridley, he was supposed to be that guy. Went off to Tennessee. The Jags led the NFL for the highest rate of incompletions due to receiver error. What does receiver error mean? Dropped passes, the receiver fell, they stopped route, stuff like that. You mentioned that they have now Brian Thomas. They swapped out Ridley for Zay Jones, Brian Thomas, Gabe Davis. They kept, also like Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. But I don't think that it's necessarily the playmakers at the wide receiver position as much as it is to do with some of the weaknesses of Trevor Lawrence. What did Mia say? When all things are working well, he's a great quarterback. That's what NFL is. When you've got a great offensive line and when you've got all your playmakers doing what they're supposed to and you have a good schedule that's working your way, hey, you're going to look pretty darn good. But what happens when things aren't falling your way? His ball placement outside the hashes, not elite. His footwork in the pocket, he sometimes gets stuck with his feet in the mud. I mean, he sometimes also has overconfidence in his arm strength. So at times, he trusts his arm way too much and it makes some really questionable throws. I think that's more of my concern. And they didn't really do anything to the offensive line. Call it a work in progress. And Trevor Lawrence under pressure, 34th in completion rate under pressure, 29th in YPA and outside the top 30 for interception rate. And you didn't really do anything to the offensive line. You signed Pro Bowl center Mitch Morse to replace Luke Fortner, and that's it. I have more question marks than I do have answers. And are they capable? Yes. But I'm also looking at this from consider it for a dating perspective. I'm no longer looking at their potential. I don't want to know what they could look like in a few years. What are you doing for me now?
I've perhaps been the most critical individual in the media locally of Press Taylor. Press is by far and away one of the more sophisticated football minds that I've ever worked with. So I want to make sure we get that out there first. He did invent the Philly special. He was the member of the Philadelphia Eagles staff that came up with the play that defined the Eagles' 2017 Super Bowl victory. So look, he is brilliant. He also was in his first year as a primary play caller, as much as he did call the plays in the second half of games during that 2022 season. That was an offense that was largely structured by Doug Peterson. He will insist to you, and it is true, that it was a group effort in 2022, but because it was Doug's first year here, he very much took the reins. Last year, because he wanted to focus a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball, and for lack of a better term, babysitting that side of the ball, he gave much more enterprising and authority to Press Taylor, as well as Trevor Lawrence, as well as Christian Kirk, as well as the offensive assistants. And unfortunately, I think the offense got away from what Doug Peterson had built in 2022, not because of anything Press Taylor said or did, but simply because you had a situation where there were too many cooks in the kitchen and that identity was lost. And ironically, that's something we talk about in Jacksonville all the time, is what is this team's identity? I think that because they were trying to do a little bit of too much last year and trying to be something perhaps that they were not, trying to fit a circle peg in a square hole. Because of that, that's why that offense never really reached its full potential. A long way of me saying the Jacksonville Jaguars could win the Super Bowl next year. Doug Peterson will never tell you who the play caller is. I have spoken on the record, or off the record, I should say, as well as on the record, with numerous people in the organization, and they believe the same thing, that we're never going to know who the primary play caller is. Press Taylor has said he doesn't care when he calls plays. He's saying all the right things too. Even if Press is calling the plays, this is going to be an offense that is designed by Doug Peterson. And I think he will be much more hands-on. And personally speaking, I think it'll end up being Doug when all is said and done. Although I could see Press taking the play calling, even if he's calling Doug's offense, akin to an Eric Bieniemy situation, or quite frankly, Doug Peterson's situation when he was the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. I would say personally pound the over on 7.5, although I think what's crazy about the Jags is their floor is probably about 6 and their ceiling is probably about 13. And I'm not sure there's another team in the National Football League that has a 7-game gap there, but that is currently where things stand with the Jacksonville Jaguars, because we don't really know what we're going to get week to week. And also knowing how arduous the first month of the season is. There's a chance the Jaguars start 1-3, but they finish the season as a 10-win team. I firmly believe that.
Let's go to the props, because that's something that stands out to me with this Jaguars roster. Ridley, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, gone. Where does it go? That's what I'm trying to figure out when we look at the season props. So you did have Kirk there. What do you have? 85 targets, 787 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the Kirk number's way up with Ridley gone. His receiving number is at 900, and the receiving touchdowns is at 4.5. Brian Thomas, rookie, no idea what he's going to do. The number's 775 in the hook. Evan Ingram coming off a career year. He was in the 900s, 963. His prop is down at 725. I thought that was pretty interesting because you don't typically see that. Guy explodes, and then they're going to lower the prop by a couple hundred yards. So where do you guys think the Ridley numbers go? Is it more Kirk, more Thomas, Gabe Davis? What?
It strikes me that they're all in on the rookie. Like, they've got to get production from Brian Thomas, big production right out of the gate, Pam. And his numbers, what'd you say, 775 and a hook, 4.5 touchdowns, right, Joe? So,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's where it goes, is him straight out the gate.
I think we're going to see a lot of, I think potentially what we could see is something like the Chiefs toss the ball around. We're going to see a little bit of equal distribution between Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas. If you give more versatility, then that's how you're going to keep the defenses in check. You're not going to become predictable. Potentially, we could be seeing that. Not a number one guy. Week 1 could be Christian Kirk. Week 2 could be Gabe Davis. Every week could be a new leading receiver. I'm also hesitant in backing the over because we've seen Press Taylor, the offensive coordinator for the Jags. What do we need to improve on? The run game. If somebody is telling you who they are, believe them. Believe them. So potentially we could see as many weapons as they're trying to add in the receiving room for Trevor Lawrence. The running back in Travis Etienne take his over rushing yards. The Jags exercise the 5th year's option on him, so they're telling you that he's going to continue to be a key part of the offense. He'll likely continue to be the primary running back, and you have Taylor himself saying more run game. So because of your offensive line, that's the improvements that you could end up making as well,
It's-
with the run block situation. So
yeah.
the futures option, I would say Etienne would be the only one that I would be considering, and kind of leaving the wide receivers for week to week basis.